Today's session is on healthy foods on a budget, and we're going to focus mainly on shopping and cooking today. Our STRIDE committee, which usually has a rep from every department across the county, we meet quarterly, and we set our new kind of focus at our July meeting for what we wanted our lunch and learns to be this year. And so the committee voted on focusing on nutrition. And so we have a couple different lunch and learns set up for the year. This first one being on healthy foods on a budget, so focusing more on the shopping and prepping. And then our December one, our next one, will be focused more on, it'll probably be November or December, focused on probably lunches and prepping for healthier options when we come to work, because that can be a struggle of us ending up coming with nothing and then maybe choosing a bad fast food option or not eating at all, which also can be bad. So we'll focus on that in the next one. But today is healthy food on a budget, some tips and tricks to share to help you shop, prep, a little bit on cooking and eating on a budget, especially for us who are working and don't have a lot of time. Jump in if you have questions as we move along as well. So let's start to talk about grocery shopping. Some of us like to shop every day. Some people prefer maybe once a week or maybe just a couple times a month or even once a month. The first tip I would give anyone is to make sure that you have a plan and when you go into a grocery store to buy your items so that you can set yourself up for success, right? And having the plan is the most important step. Some things to think about when you enter the grocery store, if you're someone who's maybe forgot their list or doesn't have a plan, some tips might be to one, shop the perimeter of the store. This is typically where our less processed foods are located. It's going to be where our more fresh and healthier foods typically are located if you think about a grocery store or even like a department store like Walmart. The perimeter typically has your produce, your fruits and your vegetables, your meats, and your dairies and protein sources. So those can be a good place to spend most of your time when you're shopping. The importance of having a list or a plan is, again, to help you kind of curb off those more one-off purchases to avoid some of those splurges or cravings that you might come across in the aisle if you stick with the list. Also, it's better to shop after you've had a meal rather than when you're hungry and trying to find what you want for supper, because that tends, if your focus is on nutrition, tends to end up you picking an unhealthy option because of the time and of the feeling in your stomach. And then, of course, be cognizant of your schedule for the week. You want to get the most money for your buck, but you don't want that food to go bad. So when you go out and shop and buy things, think about where you're going to be over the next 5 or 6 days, and will you be able to use that food, or will you be gone so much or traveling that food then rots in your fridge? So think about the days ahead as well. And then there are many places to get food these days. So also think about, where are you buying your food? That can also help you craft your list based on availability or where you tend to get your calories from. So a few things before I get into a really cool tool that I actually want to focus most of our lunch and learn on, but is some things to think about when you're shopping on a budget. There's lots of cool tools, and I'll show you one that we've been fiddling around with here at the health department in the next slide. But think about your budget. Think about what kind of cuisine you like. You know, do you like Chinese? Do you like Mexican foods? Do you like spicy foods? Do you have any intolerances? Do you have allergies? Do you need to avoid gluten, dairy products, things like that? Think about where you are in location to where you need to go shop. Does that influence how often you're going to shop? How much you can buy? How often you can go, if your products can last a long time on the shelf or not, where you prefer to shop, how much you have to buy for, how many people are in your family, how many are you trying to feed. All these things should go into when you're trying to craft what your budget should be for when you go in and shop and when you're making your list and your plan. And then also think about, what appliances do you have to cook with? Where will you be? Will you be primarily on the road and need things that don't need an oven and a microwave? Or will you be somewhere where you can have a full kitchen and have all those things? Something else to think about. So I know, for instance, my shopping list looks a lot different in the summer than it does in the winter with kids' sporting events. So I have to think more about what can travel well in a cooler versus what needs a microwave to be warmed up. And then there are some cool tools online to help you as far as like what should you budget for your meals. The USDA is one. They put out actually monthly reports on what it costs to feed a family in the US based on what prices are across the nation. I pulled August's report that just was posted a couple weeks ago. And you can see that they recommend to kind of meet the dietary guidelines that they also follow for the USDA. It would cost about $57 a week for a female or $71 a week for a male to purchase the foods that would fit into the USDA food plan, which is about $250 to $300 a month for an adult. They also do a married couple with 2 children report, and that comes out to about $230 a week or $1,000 a month. And when I think of these, I'm like, oh my gosh, that seems so large. I certainly don't think I spend that much on my family, but maybe we do, or maybe I need to get us to get better nutrition. But I think it's maybe a little skewed because obviously in other places, maybe on the coast, food and things are a little bit higher. And so that maybe is what makes ours seem higher. But if you have feedback on if you feel like you spend that much on yourself or your family, I'd be curious to know. I will show you, let me get out of this. I'm going to show you what the reports look like. If you go to the USDA food reports, it'll if you Google it, food plans, it'll bring up this page so you can see all the different food plans. And if you're in Alaska and Hawaii, you have your own report put out. But this is what they put out each month based on what prices are around the country and what you should expect, what you should be budgeting based on their USDA food model. Again, not the best source, but I think it's interesting to look at. Does anyone, you can put it in the chat. I'm just curious, do people feel like as a family you spend about $1,000 or more a month? I don't know if that looks like or not. So the main thing I wanted to talk about today is using AI. And I don't know how many of you guys are big into AI, but I started playing around with this and actually with our director, Cara, at one of her meetings, and it works. So I'm going to try to show that to you today, and we'll try a few different examples, and maybe you can use it. I actually was playing with it with my sisters over the weekend, and they started using it. My sister said she's 2 weeks in now of using it, and she loves it. So anyways, what you want to do is go to any sort of AI system you have. I've been using Copilot. And so if you guys are familiar with AI, there's lots of different versions, but I just, oops, not Airbnb, AI, Copilot. And it'll give you a little prompt. And so what I've been putting is create a 5-day meal plan for a family of 4 under, let's say, $200 using items from stores in Mason City, Iowa. And this, let's say gluten-free, because let's pretend we have an allergy. So anyways, you'll type in like specifics. So maybe you have a certain allergy, or you have a certain budget limit, or you have a certain store you want to shop at. You can type that in. And then it'll do some thinking. And usually when I do this, it gives pretty good prompts. So we'll see what it comes up with live here. So first of all, it wants us to consider shopping at Aldi's, Hy-Vee. And here are some examples. Day 1, scrambled eggs with spinach and toast. Day 2, turkey and cheese wraps, for lunch. For dinner, chicken breasts and roasted veggies. And snacks, rice cakes with peanut butter. And some of the stuff you'd be like, well, that doesn't sound good. And you can go through and you can respond and be like, on day 1, give me a better snack than rice cakes, or something that you don't like. And you can go through, and then it kind of breaks down on what you're going to be spending to give you the total. And then you could go even further and say, do you want a printable shopping list? And you could be like, yeah, make me a shopping list. And so then you can see what you need to be buying. And you could even go more specific and ask it like, can you make this just at Hy-Vee? Or, whatever that might be. So anyways, it's just a really cool tool. When I think, especially for like a busy person or a working person who doesn't have a lot of time to think about or planning their meals, a lot of times we waste half the night just trying to think of what to cook before we even decide what to cook. And this can be a nice way to get some ideas and start to get the best bang for your buck, I guess. So I'm going to stop sharing and just let you guys all talk. Has anyone tried AI in this kind of setting before, or as far as planning meals?
I have not.
Okay. Anyways, and sometimes they can, like, you can be more specific, and like the 5-day meal plan I think is a little generic, but if you're specific, like just breakfast, give me 5 breakfast ideas using leftovers of blah blah blah, or 5 breakfast ideas that I can get from Walmart for the week under $10 or something, and it'll come up with some pretty good options. So anyways, play around with it. Um, if you're into AI and want to see what it's about. But you can, like I said, once it gives you things, you can just, if you use AI, keep prompting it to fine tune it to where you want it to be specified. So, and sometimes it'll even you can ask it, okay, give me the recipes to make these things, and it'll just keep going and going and going. So let's jump back. Um, Consider AI, especially for meal planning, or if you're like if you're trying to lose weight or something and you want a certain calorie, you could say like, make me a 5-day meal plan with daily calories under 1600 with a focus on protein, whatever it might be, and it will give you some good prompts. Some other things to think about when you're in the grocery store: label reading. I know we've probably done a whole lunch and learn on label reading, but just some things to point out. One, look at um, expiration dates. Sometimes when things are on sale, it is because they're expiring soon. So just be cognizant of that. There's several different things that the dates mean. If it says used by, that's generally how likely the product is to remain of best quality. Doesn't necessarily mean it goes completely bad and you can't eat it, but it just may not taste as good or look the best. If it says expires, that basically means they can't be selling it and probably shouldn't be using it. This is actually only required on baby formulas and baby foods primarily, so you probably won't see an expiration date on too many things. And then the stamped on dates basically are to inform the grocer how long they should display that product for sale. It's just more of a safety date, not so much a quality date. Things to look out on the nutrition label would include things like added sugars, serving size, and maybe what kind of vitamins and minerals and fiber they might have, or other things you may be trying to incorporate. Like, I know a lot of people are focused on protein these days, and so you might want to check out how much protein is in certain items if you're trying to decide between things. And then the ingredient list. I think this is a good thing to look at. Also, if you're more health conscious, you want to try to avoid things like corn syrup or hydrogenated oils, some dyes and artificial things just, aren't always the best for our internal systems. But I think it's hard to keep track of all those different things of what is good. So my main tip to you is just read the ingredient list, and hopefully you know what most of them actually are. You've heard of them and can read them, and they sound natural. So if there's something with a lot of chemical sounding words, probably means there's a decent amount of man-made or chemical things in it. Where if it says apple and, jute, pear and water and whatever, that's probably a little bit more natural. So things to think about. Okay, let me present this again so it looks a little bit better for you guys. So weekly prep, some tips on once you buy your foods. What are some time-saving things, especially if you're someone who's like going to head to work for the day, or you get home late and have to get supper on the table for the family right away? One thing is maybe to consider a day where you prep all your stuff. That might be the day you come home from the store, and separate your meats and proteins into portions, wash up and trim your vegetables, wash and dry your fruit. Fruit stores pretty good in like glass jars and containers. And there's actually, I wonder if I linked it here. Let me get out of this again. Oops. It's not letting me get out. There we go. Maybe it's in the next one. Oh, I'll find it. So Iowa State has a program called Spend Smart, Eat Smart. And if you go to Produce Basics under the Cook section, they actually have a nice website here that you can see where you can see the best way to store all the different kinds of produce you might buy. So if you're like, oh, I love to buy onions, but how do you keep an onion from going bad? It will tell you. Store it in a cool, dark place. Once you're cut, seal it in a tightly sealed container and use within 7 days. So I think that's a cool little tool. And again, just Google Spend Smart, Eat Smart, Iowa State. And then it's under the Cook section for Produce Basics. And so, yeah, you can see how best to store your avocados, how to pick an avocado, all that kind of stuff. So again, just to try to keep your dollar from getting wasted. And then what also is nice is once your foods are prepped, like say you've got a bunch of vegetables cut for the week, you're much more likely to actually also grab those for snacks because they're already prepared. And when you're in a hurry, you've got some right there. Oh, there it is. Maybe I linked it down here. There, yep, I did. Okay, so eat smart, spend smart. Also as far as separating your meats in portions, like sometimes you'll buy a lot of meat because of the deals, maybe a big pork shoulder or pork loin or a ton of chicken. When you get it home before you freeze it, you could definitely, cut it and restore it in freezer safe bags or storage containers for better portions for your family, or if you're just yourself, for smaller single portions that you want to use later on. So do that before you just throw the whole package in the freezer. Okay, thinking ahead. Some people like to prep ahead of time. Some people are procrastinators like myself and get home each night and think, okay, I got to hurry up and throw a meal together. So here are a few tips for depending on which person you are. If you're someone who's a planner, you think ahead for the week, you're someone who kind of maps out your food plan for the week, here are some additional tips that you probably already do that the rest of us maybe should think about. One, cooking all your meat ahead of time, prepping it, chopping it up, putting it back into portions after it's cooked, and use that throughout the week. And again, you're pairing multiple batches or portions so that it can last you for a week or two. And then maybe even freeze some of it for later. Some people will pick a meal prep day, like on a Sunday or Monday, to do all their prepping so that they can use that food throughout the rest of the week and don't have to spend so much time cooking the rest of the week. Some tips for that, for obviously to save the most amount of time, start cooking the foods that take the longest, and while those are cooking, you're prepping your vegetables, washing your fruits, all that kind of stuff, and then dividing them into batches. If you're someone like me and you prefer quick meals at the end of each workday because you haven't thought about anything, it can still be helpful to make a schedule to at least think about it ahead of time, because like I know, if I mentioned, studies have shown that if you don't think about what you're doing, you spend a good almost 20 minutes just trying to decide what to make before you decide when you get home at night, and then you've already wasted a good chunk of time that you could have been preparing or doing something else more productive. Consider hybrid recipes. This can also help speed up things. So, be okay with maybe buying some partially store-bought foods and adding them to some homemade type of foods. So you kind of have a hybrid meal. Look ahead to see if what you're prepping can be used later in the week. So if you're making spaghetti and you got a ground beef, maybe you could ground 2 pounds of beef rather than 1 if you're going to need that extra pound later on in the week, and save yourself some time. And try to think ahead again with that meal plan if you can, to put your frozen foods, at least your meats, in the fridge a couple days ahead of time so they can thaw properly before you're ready to grab them and use them. Here's a quick example of just a meal plan for those weekly planners who do a good job of thinking ahead and getting everything ready for the week. This particular person might cook and shred their chicken, ground their meat, prepare a big bulk of rice or something like that carb, chop up all their vegetables and wash their fruits, maybe make some egg muffins to get them through the breakfasts each morning, and a batch of granola, maybe make some energy balls, and then they've got all that stuff ready. So when they get into their week, they can throw together very quick, good, nutritious meals. And so you can see some examples there of breakfast and dinner for 5 days that person could get through fairly quickly with a little bit of meal prep on the first day. Here's something that my family falls on because I'm not the planner, the quick meals. So I'm looking for recipes or ideas that are less than 30 minutes, or maybe include a crock pot so I can still just put it in, and have it ready when I get home from work. Or is it a one-pot meal so I don't, those tend to be quicker too, or at least save on the cleanup time. So there's some save there, and are limited on ingredients. So again, those tend to be simpler recipes to think about. Okay, so that was pretty quick, but I left some time just to see, for those of you who'd be willing to share, what are some of your secrets to shopping, being on a budget, meal planning, cooking for your families in a hurry, that kind of stuff. Anyone willing to speak up or put it in the chat? Don't all talk at once. Cara says, grill extra chicken on the weekends to use in different recipes. That's a great idea. I'm going to add that to our... Ooh, a vacuum sealer. That is one thing I have on my list, Hannah. I'm glad you use it. Store frozen leftovers. Anyone else want to share? Ooh, shopping at Aldi's. All my friends shop there, and I cannot get myself to shop there. But I think, again, because I'm not a planner, and so I never go with any shopping bags, or never prepared. And I also prefer like a Walmart or something where I can get everything at one stop, because I am also someone who hates to shop to begin with. So to have to go to multiple stores to get what I need is definitely a turn off to me. How many of you guys think you spend what the USDA says you should spend on yourself or your family for a month? I think it said, let me look, about $70 a week for an adult, or $230 a week for a family. You can just raise your hand. I think there's like little widgets. Good. I'm curious. I'm gonna have to go home and like look at our checkbook and see what I spend. I definitely probably spend that much going out to eat, just in one trip. Okay. All right. Anyone else have any questions or tips they want to add before I end us here? I'll give you back some time. But definitely play around with that AI tool. I think it's super neat to try out and see how it works for you. And again, remember, you can keep fine tuning it and asking it better questions to get you better results and stuff like that. And I'm curious to see if others find it. Like I said, my sister claims to be using it for the last 2 weeks because she loves it. But Curious what the rest of you will think. So, all right, I will end our recording here. And just so you know, our next Lunch and Learn is going to be focused, I believe the committee said, on lunches for the working adults. So that's all of us, and how to make those healthy and quick, and probably on a budget too, but gets us some good ideas for that. So thanks for jumping on. This is recorded, so I'm gonna put it on the Stride YouTube channel this afternoon. So if you had others that missed out on it, you can direct them there. Just go to YouTube and then Google Stride Wellness, and it should pop up the channel, and they can find it in the Lunch and Learn section. So that's where it'll be. Thank you, guys.